On Christmas Eve, my family locked me and my 10-month-old son outside in the snow. Not because I had attacked anyone, not because I had ruined dinner, not because I had done anything unforgivable. Because I finally said no. Because my older brother had humiliated my baby at the dinner table, and for the first time in my life, I did not apologize for the pain someone else caused. My name is Claire Whitmore. I am 31 years old, a single mother, and the woman my family spent years calling too sensitive. Too sensitive when my brother mocked me, too sensitive when my parents ignored me, too sensitive when I cried quietly in bathrooms after family dinners where everyone laughed at jokes that were only funny if you were not the target. But that night, when my son was crying in my arms and snow was falling on his blanket, I understood something that changed me forever. I was never too sensitive. I was the only one still feeling what everyone else had trained themselves to ignore. My older brother, Preston, was the kind of man who could break a glass and make everyone apologize for the noise. He was charming when strangers were watching and cruel when only family could hear him. He had my father's square jaw, my mother's favorite smile, and the endless confidence of a man who had never had to clean up his own mess. Growing up, Preston was not simply loved, he was protected. If he took my things, I was told to share. If he insulted me, I was told he was joking. If he screamed, everyone waited for him to calm down. If I cried, everyone told me I was making things worse. My mother, Diane, called this keeping peace. My father, Robert, called it not feeding the drama. I called it surviving, though I did not have that word when I was a child. By the time I was 13, I had learned the family rule. Preston's anger was weather, but my pain was behavior. You cannot reason with weather. You just close the windows and wait. That was what they taught me to do with him. So I became quiet, helpful, convenient, the daughter who brought extra napkins, refilled glasses, remembered birthdays, and apologized even when she had not done anything wrong. The hardest part about being the family's quiet daughter is that everyone eventually mistakes your silence for agreement. They forget you were listening. They forget you remember. I remembered Preston laughing when I won a science award in high school and saying I only got it because teachers felt sorry for me. I remembered my mother telling me not to act superior when all I had done was bring the certificate home. I remembered my father reading the newspaper through the whole dinner while I waited for one person to say they were proud. I remembered Preston using my car without asking and returning it with an empty tank. I remembered my parents telling me not to be petty when I asked him to replace the gas. I remembered being 22 and working 2 jobs while Preston lived at home rent-free because he was finding himself. Those memories did not disappear when Oliver was born. They gathered. They became the quiet evidence in the back of my mind. And on Christmas Eve, when my family looked at my crying son and still chose Preston's comfort, all those old memories stood up with me. It was not one bad night. It was the final page of a book they had been writing for years. Then I became a mother. My son's name is Oliver. He was born in February, small and serious, with dark hair that stood up no matter how gently I brushed it. The first time the nurse placed him against my chest, he opened one eye like he was suspicious of the entire world. I laughed and cried at the same time. His father left when I was 6 months pregnant. That is a different story, and somehow not the worst betrayal of my life. At least he was honest enough to leave openly. My family stayed close enough to judge. My mother said I would understand sacrifice now. My father said babies needed discipline early. Preston said single motherhood would finally teach me I was not as special as I thought. I should have pulled away then, But pregnancy makes you vulnerable to old hopes. You imagine grandparents softening. You imagine a brother becoming an uncle. You imagine a family becoming what it should have been because a baby has arrived. For 10 months, I kept giving them chances to become gentle. They did not become gentle. They became entitled to my son the same way they had always been entitled to me. Every visit with Oliver left me tired in a way sleep could not fix. My mother passed him around even when he reached for me. My father bounced him too roughly and called me nervous when I asked him to slow down. Preston made faces until Oliver cried, then said, "Wow, dramatic like his mother." I learned to pack for family visits like emergency drills. Extra diapers, extra clothes, formula, medicine, pacifiers, blanket, spare keys, a phone charger, cash in the diaper bag. Every practical thing I had once failed to prepare for emotionally, I now prepared for physically. Still, I kept going. Because my mother said Oliver deserved family. Because my father said I should not isolate him. Because relatives told me babies brought people together. Nobody warned me that babies also reveal who is unsafe. Christmas Eve was supposed to be simple. Dinner at 6, gifts at 7, family photo at 7:30. I told my mother Oliver and I would leave early because he was teething and still recovering from a cold. She sighed and said, "Just try not to make the night about the baby." I should have heard the warning in that sentence. My parents' house looked beautiful that night. Warm yellow windows, a wreath with red berries on the door, white lights along the roofline. Snow lying soft on the lawn like the whole world had agreed to be peaceful for one evening. Inside, the living room smelled like pine, roasted turkey, and cinnamon candles. A Christmas movie played silently on the television. My mother wore a green velvet dress. My father wore the red sweater she liked for photographs. Preston was already there. He stood near the fireplace with a drink in his hand, laughing too loudly at something on his phone. When he saw Oliver in my arms, his smile shifted. "Well," he said, "the little prince has arrived." I kissed Oliver's forehead and said nothing. My mother hurried toward us. "Don't start, Preston!" But she said it like she was amused. That was how our family worked. Cruelty became harmless if someone laughed before the victim reacted. Oliver was tired from the drive, but he smiled when he saw the lights on the tree. For a moment, I let myself believe the night might be okay. Dinner began with my father giving a toast about gratitude. He said family was the greatest blessing. He said no matter what happened in the world, home was where we were always welcomed. He said Christmas reminded us to forgive. I looked around that table and wondered how many families survive because people use beautiful words to cover ugly patterns. Oliver sat beside me in his high chair, chewing a soft toy shaped like a rabbit. He had eaten some mashed potato and laughed when I tapped his spoon against the bowl. My mother took pictures. My father smiled for the camera. Preston complained that the baby was blocking the wine. I moved the high chair 2 inches. That was how small I still knew how to make myself. Halfway through dinner, Oliver began to cry. Not loudly at first, just the tired, aching cry of a baby who had been passed around, photographed, overstimulated, and kept awake too long because adults wanted memories on their schedule. I reached for him immediately. Preston groaned. "Oh, come on," my mother whispered. "Claire, take him out before your brother loses patience." Before your brother loses patience. Not before Oliver gets too upset. Not before the baby needs comfort. Before Preston loses patience. I stood and unbuckled the high chair. Oliver reached for me, face red, little hands shaking. I lifted him and pressed him to my shoulder. Preston leaned back in his chair. That kid runs your life. He's a baby, I said. He's spoiled. He is 10 months old. Preston laughed. And somehow already winning. My father set down his fork. Claire, don't be defensive. I stared at him. My brother had insulted my baby. My father corrected my tone. Something old inside me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, more like ice splitting under pressure. I said, "Do not talk about my son like that." The table went silent. Not because I had said something cruel, but because I had said something forbidden. I had defended myself. Preston's face changed. He stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. Oliver startled and began crying harder. I turned my body away, shielding him. Preston said, "You think having a baby makes you untouchable?" I said, "I think having a baby makes me responsible." My mother stood too, hands fluttering. Everyone calm down. But she looked at me when she said it. My father said, "Apologize to your brother." The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. My baby was sobbing against my chest. My brother was standing over us. And I was supposed to apologize. That was the exact shape of my childhood. I said, "No." One syllable. It felt like stepping through a locked door. My father's eyes hardened. My mother inhaled sharply. Preston smiled, but his smile was thin now. "No," my father repeated. "No," I said again. "I'm leaving." The next few minutes moved strangely, as if I were watching them through glass. I carried Oliver into the hallway and grabbed his diaper bag. My hands were trembling, but my mind was clear. Coat, hat, blanket, bottle, keys. My mother followed me. "You're overreacting." I zipped Oliver's snowsuit. "You always do this," she said. "You make one comment into a tragedy." I put his hat over his ears. "Claire, your father is embarrassed." That made me turn. "Oliver is scared," I said. "Why does Dad's embarrassment matter more than my child?" She looked away. That look told me the answer had always been yes. My father came into the hallway then. Preston stood behind him with his arms folded. Dad said, "If you walk out now, don't come back tomorrow. Don't come back next week. Don't come back when you need help." I held Oliver closer. "For once," I said, "that sounds like help." I opened the front door. Snow blew in immediately. Oliver whimpered at the cold, and I covered his face with the blanket. I stepped onto the porch, struggling with the diaper bag and his weight, my boots slipping on the top step. Behind me, the door slammed. Then came the lock. A small metallic click. It was the sound of my family choosing themselves. I walked down the steps and reached for my keys. They were not in my coat pocket. Not in the diaper bag. Not in my jeans. Then I remembered placing them on the entry table when my mother asked me to carry dessert into the dining room. Inside, Oliver cried harder. Snow gathered on the blanket. My hands went numb. I knocked on the door. "Mom, my keys are inside." No answer. I knocked again. "Dad, please, Oliver is cold." Through the narrow window beside the door, I saw a shadow move and disappear. That was the moment something inside me stopped begging. I had begged for fairness, begged for kindness, begged to be understood, begged them to choose me once when Preston was the easier choice. But standing in the snow with my son crying against me, I finally understood that begging is what you do when you still believe the door belongs to someone else. I did not need them to open it. I needed to leave it behind. My spare key was in the lining of the diaper bag. I had hidden it there months earlier after a different dinner, a smaller humiliation, a moment when my mother had taken my keys so I wouldn't rush off angry. Back then, I told myself I was being paranoid. That night, paranoia looked like wisdom. I found the key, unlocked my car, and strapped Oliver into his seat with hands so cold they barely worked. The heat took too long. He kept crying. I kept whispering, "I've got you, I've got you, I've got you." I was not sure who I was saying it to. Him, or the little girl in me who had waited years for someone to say it. I drove to the nearest urgent care because I needed proof Oliver was okay. A nurse checked his temperature, listened to his lungs, and said he was cold and exhausted but stable. She wrapped him in a warm blanket, gave me a look I recognized from my own hospital shifts, and asked quietly, "Do you feel safe going home tonight?" I almost gave the automatic answer. Yes, it was a misunderstanding. Families argue, I'm fine. Instead, my mouth told the truth before my fear could stop it. No, I said, not with them. The nurse sat beside me. She did not rush. She did not ask why I had upset them. She did not tell me Christmas was stressful for everyone. She said, "Do you have somewhere else to go?" I called my friend Naomi. She answered groggy, then heard my voice and became completely awake. "Come here," she said. "I'll unlock the door now." That was the first door that opened for me that night. Naomi lived in a small townhouse with crooked stairs, mismatched mugs, and the warmest living room I had ever entered. She took Oliver while I took off my wet boots. She did not ask for the whole story before helping. She did not need me to justify my emergency. She warmed a bottle. She found extra blankets. She put my clothes in the dryer. She set up a portable crib beside the Christmas tree, which had paper ornaments her kids had made years before. Oliver finally fell asleep at 2 in the morning. I sat on Naomi's couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the lights on her tree until they blurred. Naomi handed me tea and said, "You know they can't be your emergency contact anymore." I looked at her. The sentence landed with terrifying clarity. My family had always been listed as the people to call if something happened to me. But if something happened to me, they would protect the wrong person. The next morning, I changed every emergency contact form I could find. Hospital, daycare application, pediatrician, work records. One line at a time, I removed them from the places where trust was written down. My phone filled with messages before noon. My mother wrote, "You ruined Christmas over nothing." My father wrote, "Adults don't run away from family disagreements." Preston wrote, "Hope the little king enjoyed his performance." No one asked if Oliver was warm. No one asked if he had been checked by a doctor. No one asked where we slept. That absence became evidence. I took screenshots of everything. Then I wrote one message in the family group chat. "Oliver and I are safe. We will not attend gatherings where he is mocked, frightened, or used to punish me. Do not contact me unless you are ready to acknowledge what happened without blaming me for reacting to it." My mother replied, "You are being cruel." For once, I did not answer. Silence felt different when I chose it. Before, silence had been something they forced into my mouth. Now it was a locked gate I controlled. The days after Christmas felt like detox. Not from love, from obligation. I kept reaching for my phone as if I needed to check whether my mother was angry. Then I remembered I did not have to answer. I would hear a car outside and tense, expecting my father's knock. I would read Preston's messages again, trying to find some hidden sign that he understood what he had done. There was none. Naomi told me trauma bonding can feel like homesickness for a place that hurt you. That sentence stayed with me, because I did miss them sometimes. Not the real dinner table, not the locked door, not my brother's smirk. I missed the family I kept trying to build out of fragments. The mother I wanted when I was scared, the father I wanted when I was tired, the brother I wanted Oliver to have. Letting go of them meant grieving people who had never fully existed. That was the strange cruelty of it. I was not only leaving my family, I was leaving my hope that they would become one. Work became harder before it became easier. At the hospital, I could comfort strangers without shaking. I could start IVs, clean wounds, speak gently to frightened families, and chart every detail with professional calm. Then I would go home and fall apart because my own family had made me feel unsafe for telling the truth. One night, an elderly patient grabbed my hand and said, "You have kind eyes." I cried in the supply closet for 7 minutes. Kindness felt unbearable when I had spent years begging for scraps of it from people who should have given it freely. But slowly, work helped me rebuild. I started noticing the way healthy families behaved in crisis. They asked questions. They brought sweaters. They argued softly over who should drive home because everyone wanted to help. They did not punish vulnerability. They moved toward it. That became my new definition of love. Love moves toward need. My family had moved away from it. Once I understood that, I stopped calling their distance complicated. I called it what it was. The first time Oliver got sick after Christmas, I almost called my mother. It was 2 in the morning. He had a fever, not dangerously high, but high enough to scare a tired mother. I held him in the rocking chair, one hand on his warm back, and reached for my phone. My thumb hovered over her name. Then I remembered the door. I remembered knocking. I remembered saying, "Oliver is cold." I called Naomi instead. She answered with a hoarse, sleepy voice and said, "Tell me his temperature." No guilt, no complaint, no reminder that it was late. Just help. We talked through the fever plan. She stayed on the phone while I gave him medicine and changed his pajamas. She told me I was doing fine. After we hung up, I cried again. Not because I was alone, because I finally understood I had not been asking too much. I had just been asking the wrong people. When people say boundaries are harsh, I think they imagine a locked gate. But boundaries are not only about keeping people out. They are about keeping the vulnerable parts of your life protected long enough to heal. My boundary with Preston was simple. No access to Oliver. Not supervised. Not holiday only. Not just for a photo. No! My mother called that extreme. I called it pattern recognition. Preston did not see babies as people. He saw them as interruptions, props, noise, proof that attention had shifted away from him. A person who resents a child for needing comfort is not a safe person for that child. I did not need a court order to know that. I needed a spine. And slowly, painfully, I built one. Not from anger. From repetition. Every time I said no and survived, another piece strengthened. January was the month I learned how deep the old training went. I started therapy and cried in the parking lot before the first session, because some part of me still believed I needed permission to tell the truth. My therapist asked me to describe Christmas Eve as if it had happened to another mother. So I did. A woman brings her baby to dinner. Her brother mocks the baby. Her parents defend the brother. The woman leaves to protect her child. Her family locks her outside in winter, ignores her when she asks for keys, and later demands that she apologize. When I finished, my therapist asked, "Would you tell that mother she was too sensitive?" I shook my head so hard I started crying again. That question became a bridge. Every time guilt rose in me, I crossed that bridge. Would I want Oliver to accept this from people who claimed to love him? Would I want him to believe peace meant letting someone hurt his child? The answer was always no. And slowly, no became a place I could stand. My mother came to my apartment in February. She arrived with a gift bag, a tired smile, and the expression she used when she wanted to be seen as wounded before anyone mentioned what she had done. I opened the door but did not invite her in. She held up the bag. "For Oliver," I said. "You can leave it outside." Her eyes filled. "Claire, don't be like this." That phrase had followed me my entire life. Don't be like this, meaning don't remember. Don't name it. Don't make me feel what I did. I said. You stood inside a warm house while my baby was outside in the snow. For once, my mother had no immediate answer. Then she whispered, "Your father was angry." I said, "And you chose his anger over our safety." She looked smaller then, not sorry enough, not safe enough, but smaller. I closed the door before she could turn her guilt into my responsibility. That was the first time I protected my peace before explaining my pain. The real test came in April, on Oliver's first birthday. I planned a small party at a community room near the park. Cupcakes, balloons, Naomi and her kids, 2 friends from work, no alcohol, no speeches, no family photo designed to prove what no one was living. The morning of the party, my father texted, "We are coming. Enough of this nonsense." My body reacted before my mind did. Cold hands, tight chest, the old urge to obey. Then Oliver crawled across the rug toward a blue balloon, laughing with his whole body. I looked at him and typed, "You are not invited." My father replied, "You don't get to decide who is family." I answered, "I get to decide who has access to my son." They came anyway. I saw them through the glass doors. My father in his dark coat, my mother clutching a gift, Preston behind them, smirking like he expected me to fold in public. For a second, the room tilted. Then Naomi touched my elbow and said, "I'm right here." I walked to the door. I stepped outside before they could enter. My mother lifted the gift bag. "We just want to see the birthday boy." I said, "This is a private party. You need to leave." Preston laughed. "Still punishing everyone because your baby cried?" I looked at him, and for the first time, I did not feel 12 years old. "No," I said. "I am protecting my son from people who punished him for crying." My father stepped closer. "Do not embarrass this family in public." There it was, the family god, appearance. I said, "You locked a baby outside in the snow. The embarrassment already happened. I am only refusing to hide it." My mother gasped. Preston's smirk vanished. My father looked around to see who had heard. That told me everything. Not what happened. Who knew? I said, "Leave now, or I will ask staff to remove you." My father stared at me like he was waiting for the old Claire to return. She did not. Finally, he turned and walked away. My mother followed. Preston muttered something I did not chase. I went back inside, shaking, and Oliver smashed frosting into his hair like freedom was normal. After that day, people began to understand I was serious. My mother asked for a mediated conversation. I agreed because healing does not require access. But sometimes truth deserves a room with witnesses. She cried. She said Christmas got out of hand. She said she missed Oliver. She said she never meant for us to be outside that long. I listened. Then I said, "You could have opened the door." The room went quiet. There was no family theory big enough to hide that sentence. She could have opened the door. My father could have opened it. Preston could have opened it. Any one of them could have chosen a cold baby over a warm ego. They did not. My mother asked if there was a way back. I told her, "There may be a way forward. There is no way back." Back was the dining room where my brother's comfort mattered more than my child's fear. Back was the porch. Back was the lock. Back was me begging. I would never go back to being a daughter at the cost of being a mother. The next Christmas, I stayed home. Naomi came over. A neighbor brought soup. My work friend Maya came with her twins. The apartment was small, noisy, imperfect, and real. Our ornaments were plastic because Oliver liked throwing them. The cookies were uneven because he pressed his whole hand into the dough. The candles were battery-powered because toddlers are tiny chaos machines. It was the best Christmas I had ever had. At one point, snow began falling outside the window. For a moment, my body remembered the cold, the driveway, the locked door, Oliver crying into my coat. Then Oliver toddled over, pressed both palms to the glass, and shouted, "No!" He meant snow. I laughed so hard I cried. Memory did not disappear, it changed shape. It became proof. Proof that I had carried us out. Proof that a locked door can become an exit if you stop begging to be let back in. Proof that family is not who shares your blood or your last name or your holiday table. Family is who opens the door when your child is cold. I am still low contact with my parents. Preston is not allowed near Oliver. That boundary is not under review. My mother sometimes sends careful messages now. Not perfect, not enough to erase anything, but different. She is learning that access to my life is no longer automatic. My father has not apologized. He sends formal birthday cards with no return address, as if dignity can be maintained through stationery. I do not hate them. Hate would require me to keep holding them too tightly. I release the rope. For years, they pulled and pulled, expecting me to fall toward them. The day I let go, they fell backward into the truth. I still have the blanket Oliver wore that night. I washed it 3 times, but sometimes I imagine I can still feel the cold in its corners. I keep it in a box with his hospital bracelet, his first birthday candle, and the spare car key that saved us. Not as a shrine to pain. As evidence of the night I stopped being the daughter who endured everything and became the mother who chose the door, the snow, the road, and finally, freedom.